Oh, time to get out. Oh, where's my package? Huh? What's this? Okay, so we've got Jurassic Park for the Sega Genesis and Jurassic Park for the Super Nintendo.
Poorly compared. Jurassic Park. Sega Genesis versus Super Nintendo.
Okay, I should probably explain how this is going to work. Yeah, I'm not just going to toss both games into the ring with boxing gloves. No, I recorded around 40 to 50 minutes of each game, starting from the start. Both campaigns in the case of the Genesis one. So yeah, gonna show footage from that, do a bit of voiceover to explain some points, and hopefully this will be coherent. And for no particular reason, let's start off by looking at the game for the Super Nintendo. This game opens strong with a spin around an outline of Isla Nublar before going into it. And then you end up on what looks like a computer navigation screen. And I should probably talk about why. This game supports the SNES mouse, which you can use to navigate this screen and several other screens like it that pop up throughout the game. And you don't have to own the SNES mouse to do this. You can navigate it perfectly fine using the gamepad. It's just, in my opinion, I find when you do that the cursor moves a bit fast. And I wanted an excuse to use the SNES mouse. Moving on to gameplay, the outdoor areas are a top-down shooter. I'll get to the indoor areas later, but for the outdoor, you basically go around, you can collect different pickups to get different guns or throwables, or if you're me, you can just die to dinosaurs a lot. However, when you're not dying, you might need to know the controls. It's fairly straightforward. You use the D-pad to move, A to shoot, B to jump, X picks stuff up, and Y is an alternate shoot where you use your throwable, if you have one. And as you might expect, start is pause. Other than the controls, some other neat features of the outdoor areas include hills with different height levels, also falling rocks, gotta watch out for those. There are also gates and other mechanisms that you have to shoot to activate, and there's also obstacles that you have to jump over, which I am great at.
Hold it right there. Yeah, you forgot something.
Yeah, I may have forgotten to mention that there's also these pop-ups that will occur throughout the game to give you tips or just tell you what to do. Okay, let's move on to the indoor sections. I probably forgot something to cover, but I'll come back to that later when I remember what it was. So, I mentioned earlier, the indoor sections are a bit different. For those of you unfamiliar with this game, you are probably expecting it to be some type of platformer. Could be more wrong. Welcome to another 2.5D first-person shooter! Hold up! Alright, being serious for now, at least. It isn't Doom. It actually came out before Doom, but I'll talk about that later. Yeah, it's a lot slower and methodical, and you can definitely tell from the music it's meant to be a more suspenseful, make your way around carefully rather than a whole running gun approach. Yeah, I just wanted to have some fun with the editing. While you're inside, you'll notice that the controls have also changed a bit. 1, the pickup button now does nothing because you'll just pick stuff up when you walk over it. 2, sideways on the D-pad now rotates you rather than moving you sideways, and in addition, the L and R bumpers can also do the same function. But there's one other thing about the indoor controls that's interesting. You can use that SNES mouse that you haven't been using while you were wandering around outside. Yeah, so moving the mouse up and down will move you forwards and backwards. Sideways will rotate you. And then right click, I believe, is your alt fire, and left click is your normal fire. So in a way, you can get this set up almost like a modern first-person shooter. This is kind of weird. So I don't like using the gamepad to rotate, but what I don't like with the mouse is moving forward and backwards. So I kind of got this weird combo thing going where I was using the mouse to shoot and aim, but I was using the controller to move forward and backwards. Kind of like a pseudo WASD and mouse setup. Just thought I should mention that. Alright, let's wrap up what I want to say about the Super Nintendo version. Alright, so still sticking indoors, there's elevators, which will move you between different floors, and sometimes you need them to access outdoor areas that you can only get through said elevators. Also, I wasn't able to find anything to confirm this, but I think the indoor FPS sections are rendered at a lower resolution instead of that full screen, just I'll put a graphic on screen to show what I meant, but I think they're rendering a smaller area to save resources, because it already feels like they're kind of pushing the limit a little with this one. Alright, so with that wrapped up, let's move over to the Sega Genesis. This game opens with the T-Rex telling you which side he supports in the console war. And in hindsight, maybe having an extinct animal vouch for you isn't a great sign. But other than that, it also has a really cool shot of the Jurassic Park gates leading you to the main menu. Speaking of the main menu, there are some options you can access from there. From there, you can change the game difficulty, which I think just adjusts how much damage enemies do. I set it to easy because I normally die to falling off of stuff rather than enemies. And yeah, as you're probably going to see, I had a hard enough time with that anyway. Other than that, you can also turn the music off, and if you do, you're a monster. And you can also customize the controls, which just changes what each of the 3 buttons does. As you saw, I chose to play Velociraptor first, because historically, Jurassic Park's not had the greatest survival rate for humans. And as you boot it up, you'll get some cinematic pictures and some text to read. You have broken out of the raptor cage and you are free to roam the island. You have picked up the scent of Dr. Grant. As you stalk him through the jungle, beware of armed guards. The first level basically just serves as a bit of a tutorial. It gives you some space to figure out what you're doing, move around with D-pad, and 3 buttons are attack, other attack, and jump. And you can modify those by holding a direction on the D-pad. Pretty simple. Until you get to them like me and accidentally fall because you're on the wrong level from Dr. Grant. And once you've either managed to get past the area you keep falling down, or go through all 3 of your lives, which are those health bars up at the top, then you will move on to the next level. And in between each level you'll get a password, which is really neat. And useful feature is it will save the last password you got, so if you need to say restart 6 times because keep failing a certain fall and the stupid pipe level, yeah, that's nice. But hey, you might also want to play as Dr. Grant. And if you do, well, there's a few features that you don't have as a Velociraptor. For 1, firearms. For 2, climbing on vines. And just gotta mention this, for probably the first 6 times I played through the opening level, I didn't realize that you could climb onto those vines. They just looked like background, which is a bit of an issue this game has at times where the assets that are in the foreground that you can interact with kind of just blend in with the background because of the color grade of everything, which just tends to be dark. The last thing I should mention is that this game has a few more rough edges, let's say, compared to the Super Nintendo game. 1, there's a few times where you can just either clip through stuff that doesn't seem like you should be able to, or you could just fall off the bottom of the world and see that, they didn't bother drawing the rest of the asset down there. Again, not a big deal, just kind of one of those things you notice. And the other thing is, this thing doesn't have the best controls for a platformer, or, well, it's more a combination of the controls and the collision. And so that just makes it a little frustrating at times. And more than a little frustrating at other times. That said, it's not a bad game by any measure, especially when you compare it to some of the game-breaking stuff people seem to think is fine to ship for a new game nowadays. It's just, one of those small things that kind of annoys me more than it should. With all that said, the title of this video does contain the words poorly compared. So I should maybe actually do a bit of comparison here. So I've come up with a few categories I'm going to compare the games in, and then give points based on my opinion, and you either get a point for the category or you don't. So, these categories are music, and then what I'm going to call the hop it and play / kill an hour test, which is just, hey, if I only had a bit of time to spare, which one would I rather just hop into? Next is going to be graphics, then controls, and if you've listened to the previous section, you probably already know the outcome for that, but hey. And then the final category is just going to be miscellaneous features or novelty. I don't want it to just be another cookie cutter because, hey, there's a lot of just top-down run around to do stuff or platformers. Gotta do something a little different. Going into the first category, music, I'm giving a point to both. They both have great soundtracks. Admittedly, the Super Nintendo version, not always the strongest inside, but hey, it's got a fun arcadey sound to it, and the Genesis has a bit more of a suspenseful sound to it. Both of them are good soundtracks, so point to both. So we know both games have great music, but what if I only had, say, 15 minutes, half an hour to kill, just wanted to hop into something? For me, this is an easy choice. Super Nintendo. Now, the Genesis is great if I was going to go for a longer play session, because as I'd go through, I'd remember where all the kind of trick falls in the level are, or there's certain places where you can jump, and even if you would land on a platform, it triggers like a fall mechanic where you automatically die and lose a life. That would annoy me if I was just trying to kill a few minutes, but hey, in the long run, that's part of the game. That's actually kind of fun, and it's just an extra challenge. But if I just wanted to, say, run around for 15 minutes shooting dinos, Super Nintendo all the way. The third category is graphics. Now, yes, the Super Nintendo has the 2.5D first-person shooter segments. It's very colorful and nice outdoors, but I actually prefer the darker graphics of the Genesis version, even when some of the assets kind of get lost in the background. And hey, if I was going to have a poster of some pixel art, I'd much rather have the Genesis. And that's really what it comes down to for me. I just like the style more. I think it fits Jurassic Park better. Next category, controls. Kind of went on about this already, but hey, Super Nintendo wins. You're going to use the mouse, it works fine without it, and it doesn't feel like you're being hampered by the controls. And that brings us to the final category, Miscellaneous or Novelty Factor. So, let's look at both games. On the Super Nintendo, you've got the first-person segments, and you can also use the mouse for the computer interfaces. And then, on the Genesis side, you've got the password system, which allows you to easily restart if you die, and you can also play as both human and raptor, which is kind of fun. But, ultimately, I'd go with the Super Nintendo for this category. Both have their draws, but I think the Super Nintendo just does it a bit better with what it went with. That and I might still be a little mad about some of the collision. Hey, even though the point totals are there, I do want to discuss one other thing. And this is like jumping ahead a few decades, but these games kind of remind me of two other similar games, which are Primal Carnage and Second Extinction. Now, the Jurassic Park game reminds me a lot of Second Extinction. As I've said, it's fun to just hop into, and you can have fun even if you're not doing the missions like you're supposed to. On the other hand, I'd say on the Genesis, Jurassic Park is a lot more like Primal Carnage. It's challenging, but it's really fun once you get into it, even with some of the glitchiness. That goes for both games. Hey, you can even play as human or dinosaur in both games. At the end of the day, a lot of this will come down to personal preference, but both games are quite fun. Even though I awarded the Super Nintendo more points, hell, I've gone out and I bought a copy of Jurassic Park for the Genesis that was in better condition because, hey, I really like that game too. If you're able to, I'd recommend checking out either of these games. Depending on where you are, finding them might be more or less difficult, but yeah, I'm just going to pass it to me in the future for the conclusion. Hey, thanks for watching. Let me know what you thought of that. Took me a while to get together, but I did try quite a few different things with editing, so let me know what you thought of that. And yeah, oh, the footage you're seeing in the background here, this is Visitor Center by Progium. Basically, someone remade one of the indoor levels from the Super Nintendo game, but for desktop. So yeah, I've linked that in the description if you want to check that out. Otherwise, yeah. Well, given that this poorly compared video took me, well, a year from planning to finishing it, who knows when the next one's going to come out. I have some ideas, but definitely not going to be my next video. That will probably be either an addition to the playthrough of the original Far Cry, or me messing around with some actual hardware. So stay tuned for that, and until next time, I guess interactions exist.